Hey there, instructional designers. Welcome to a mini video lecture on the integrative model. According to the authors of our textbook, the integrative model is designed to help students see relationships among the components of a complex topic. As students try to make sense of complicated webs of associations, they build or revise the schemata that they have previously constructed to make sense of similar information. The integrative model helps teachers and students organize discrete pieces of information into a more manageable whole so that a deep understanding of topics and the relationships among topical elements can be developed. Our textbook provides several different examples of what this model looks like and the steps of it. So the steps include planning for the integrative model. So there's some things that happen on the teacher side of things before the lesson begins in order to gather the things necessary for students to describe, compare, and search for patterns in a data set. That data set could be something that is teacher generated. It could be something that already exists and is found on the internet or in textbooks. So during the planning stage, the teacher will either find or create whatever that data set is. The next step is engaging students in explaining identified similarities and differences that they notice in the data set, hypothesizing what would happen under different conditions, and then making broad generalizations about the topic and the discussion. So we're going to do an example of this in the content of economics and personal finance. So this lesson is designed around the following objectives: that students will know the basic economic principles that underline the United States market economy, that students will know the role of the individual and how economic decisions are made in the marketplace, and the student can use a decision-making model to identify costs and benefits of a specified choice made. Integrative lessons are developed around data sets, bits and pieces of information that are ordered in matrices, graphs, maps, pictures, or other displays. And we're going to look at one in just a minute. But before we do that, we're going to build a little background knowledge with an introduction to economics. So if you want to pause this video here, you're welcome to, and go into the slides. You can click on this. It'll take you to a crash course economics video that'll explain that economics is the study of people and choices, and that's ultimately what we're going to be thinking about using the integrative model today. So you can pause for a minute, take a look at the crash course video, and then come back. So I hope you found that crash course video useful. So here is an example of a data set, and I sourced this online, so it's not a teacher-created one. And I would begin by inviting students to just spend some time with this particular infographic. So if you want to take a closer look, you can click on this image in the slides. It'll take you to this online, and you can zoom in and see a larger version of this online. And so it just gives students some time to just look at it, what stands out to them, what do they notice, begin to ask some questions in this larger discussion with the whole class, and then to ask them, what type of data is represented in this infographic? What comparisons do you notice? Some of them are explicit and some of them are implicit. What are they? Which ones are clearly labeled as comparisons, and which ones do you have to infer a little bit? What patterns do you notice? So then the next step in the model is where we work on explaining the identified similarities and differences. So we noticed them, and now we're going to try and understand why they're there. So the teacher might ask some questions like, focusing on the comparison between the annual cost of cats and dogs, how can you explain the differences between the two? Why might you expect to see some similarities? Why would you expect to see some differences? Poodles get groomed. Cats generally don't. So inviting students to engage in that conversation to reason about the data that they're observing. In the next step, you invite students to hypothesize what would happen under different conditions. And so this infographic, for example, came from Nationwide, which is an insurance company. So you might ask students to think about or hypothesize, how might the data displayed be different if it were created by a vet clinic? What if it was created by the Humane Society? What would be different under those different conditions? What would the purpose be? And how would that change what the data is and how it's represented? So then you could invite students to make broad generalizations. And in keeping with the objectives for this particular lesson, to invite students to do that, I've included some decision-making models. So you could introduce these to students, or maybe in an economics and personal finance course, students have already engaged with these various decision-making models. So you might ask, should I get a dog? And in that case, you could use a cost-benefit decision model, which is a model that helps you decide whether or not to do something when the choice is either a yes or a no. Just to clarify, these cost-benefit models are not part of the integrative model per se. They're just a way that in this lesson, I'm choosing to invite students to make generalizations. So maybe the question is, should I get a dog or a cat? And in that case, when there are two choices, you can use a cost-benefit decision tree. So it combines basically two cost-benefit models with these two choices. Alternatively, if the question is more than two choices, like what pet should I get, you can use the PACE decision model. And it's used when there are various options or alternatives, but also certain things or criteria that are important to you. Maybe it's the cost of food. Maybe it's the cost of veterinary care. Maybe it's the cost of pet insurance. So when you identify what those criteria are, then you can think of what the problems are, what the alternatives are, the criteria, evaluate, and then make your decision. So I might invite students to generalize from the data on that infographic by completing one of these decision-making models, having them make generalizations based on the data that we had explored together. So this is just one example of how a teacher might use the integrative model. Have you engaged with exploring data in your classes? How have you seen teachers use something similar to this? Are you going to try this out for your lesson? Let me know how it goes.